their equipment that the Public Works Department and the Parks Department would need.
Right, like I'm looking at the Nissan Ariya, which is like $100 a month with 3,300 down. So I was just wondering if there's a way to be creative.
We also have to consider that 2 of the vehicles are going to be police vehicles, which means that they're going to be fit out, which I don't know how that works with leasing, but
No, I'm thinking of the ones that are just,
the in-house.
that are the dedicated in-house ones, yeah.
I think we looked into this 100 years ago, whether it was best to lease or buy. And I think we decided in the end, because there was a better recapture of the vehicle at auction with an outright purchase as opposed to a lease. And the leasing opportunity did not save us that much money.
Well, it depends on your interest rate when you're going out to market as far as the leases are concerned. Usually what the finance department does is that they'll lease the vehicle for 3 years. They have a large upfront cap reduction cost, and then there's 2 more payments after that. We'll own the car or the equipment at the 3rd year. But it really depends on the interest rates, and I haven't gone out to market for, for leasing in quite a few years, probably a pre-pandemic.
Okay,
Thanks.
perfect.
So you'll get back to us and let us know
Not
will.
before we have to make a decision.
you don't have to make a
regarding the
decision, you're going to let us know what's the
Well, it
best.
depends on which direction that you want to go in. For the admin vehicle, do you want a Mach EV, or do you want to go with a hybrid, or do you want to go with the ICE?
I'm hearing that
Ford Escape.
everyone wants like the $29,000 deal with a rebate.
Yeah, I can't. I think we made a commitment when we decided we wanted to get off fossil fuel, ready for 100, and I think this takes us in that direction. I see that it's not that much more than the Echo vehicle, and it does put us, we put our money where our mouth is, right? We follow through on the plan that we set up. We decided that we wanted to be ready for 100. We decided that we wanted to slowly get ourselves off fossil fuel, and let's do it.
I humbly think we should use the money as the driver at this point, Judy, but I'll go with what the board decides.
We were talking about
We vote.
They suggested that.
I agree with Judy. I believe that we need to dip our toe in, and I think that we can get this at a reasonable cost. And I know the finance committee will work, or the finance team will work on getting us the best deal that we can with this budget. So I'm in favor of looking into the EV.
EV option 2.
EV option 2 for the admin, and hybrid option 1, 2 of those vehicles for the police.
Got it.
So I have 2 questions related to the admin vehicle and the budget. First is are we limited to just co-stars for this, or can we go to other vendors for an electric vehicle?
We would need to purchase off of CoStars or one of the other group purchasings that we belong to. If not, we're going to have to write the specification and bid it ourselves, which I don't necessarily know I want to try to write that bid. No offense to anybody. They're complicated, especially when it comes to a vehicle and
necessary.
something, that has already been done by others. And I think we should piggyback.
So my other question, looking at budget projection for 2025, what is the current age of the admin vehicle?
22 years?
21 years old.
Is it in dire need of a replacement, or is it something that we could potentially push back another year? And I ask this because in another year, there'll likely be more hybrid and EV options.
But that doesn't satisfy. Judy's position is that we should start this procedure now.
Well, I understand that. I am curious because of what we're looking at later in this discussion, if it could possibly make sense to delay it a year for budget reasons and for planning reasons for more options at potentially cheaper costs.
I agree with you, Dan. I think it makes sense, and I think there will be more options at that point, and it's also a vehicle that gets less than, what are they, like 5,000 miles? Like, it's a really low mileage.
I think Dan was asking the question, not making a statement.
Yeah.
So
I've talked to our fleet manager, and we actually Dave, Anne Marie, Ken and I have all talked to him, and I asked that question exactly. Could we delay replacing the Crown Vic that's
Yes.
21 years old?
I
And
realize the Crown
he's-
Vic, that says a lot
he's-
already.
He's starting to get a little nervous on it. I mean, by the time, he'd like to see us get ready for the new year and get it earlier than trying to push it through the whole of '25. It's starting to wear, it's 21 years old, it was a hand-me-down vehicle.
It's starting to run into structural problems as
Problems,
far
yeah.
as, deterioration as far as the underneath is concerned and the body is concerned.
Do you happen to know the mileage off the top of your head?
64,000 some odd miles.
Pretty good for a 21-year-old vehicle.
Yeah.
Doylestown's only 76 square miles, or linear
Well,
miles.
I know that. One of the reasons, I mentioned that is because I know it's 21 years old, but just from the mileage alone, we're not using it at the rate of like a standard homeowner car
No,
would be.
I would like to see Judy's plan put into effect, and we get this hybrid now, and maybe we can squeeze some money elsewhere. I think it's important that we honor our commitment. And anyway, a 21-year-old car, come on, it's got to cost a lot of money as a gas guzzler, right?
It costs approximately about $82 a year in fuel,
Oh,
around 100.
thanks. Not helping the cause over here. But it's not a very efficient gas guzzler.
No.
It's not an efficient
But
vehicle.
it's the wear and tear, and again, I think it's got to be the safety when employees are utilizing the vehicle. If they're going to the bank, that might be one thing, but this vehicle is also used to go to training, which might be
yes,
King
if I
of
may
Prussia,
say
et
that-
cetera.
Yes, the car is reliable to go to the bank and back and forth. I would not take it to State College for a conference. I would not take it to Hershey for a conference. I wouldn't take it, any long distance, trips as far as that is concerned.
Do other townships also have a separate car like we do, sitting for these types of situations with banks and training?
As far as I know, yes.
I think it's a liability also to use your
I-
personal vehicle for work.
Thank you. I assumed.
Okay. So do you need some more direction on,
No, if that's the consensus from the board, we'll do the budget for the Interceptor, for the police car, to be fitted out. The detective car would be the Ford Escape Hybrid, the self-charging, and what I'm hearing is that we'll move into the Mach-E EV and put that into the budget for capital.
Well, that's my position. I think it's.
I think you have that
done and-
consensus. Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
If we're not going
Nay
to
for
delay
me.
it, that's fine with
That's
me.
okay.
Thank you,
Thank
fellow
you.
board members, too. Thank you.
The other piece of the proposed capital is that there will be amendment to CapEx 2416, which is the radio repeaters. This is to include the police radios with an offsetting grant, which you will hear more about in the Board of Supervisors meeting. I know it's on that agenda as well. I just wanted to make you aware, there's no cost to the township. It's an offsetting grant. And it looks like we got the consensus from the board for capital. Any questions before we move on from capital?
Just to clarify with the offsetting grant, so will that be in the budget, but ultimately it's shouldn't cost us anything?
Correct. What
Okay,
will
just making sure I
happen,
understood.
yes, what will happen is we'll meet with the department heads once we get the budget approved, and we'll make a timeline to make sure we get, we spend the money and then get the grant. We just make sure that we flow through with all those projects that have that offsetting.
Correct, thank you.
And we put both the grant and the expense in the budget,
You'll see both, yep.
net zero.
Gotcha.
So we're going to move on to the operating budget for 2025. So I'm going to hit on four important pieces of our operating budget. EIT, we're going to forecast the growth assumption, continue the growth assumption to 2%. Our uniform wages, per their contract, they get a 4.5% raise. So their salaries are going to be up in 2025, a little over $400,000. That also includes the 2 new officers that will now be here a full year. For non-uniform wages, the 2025 budget will be up about $341,000, which includes the 5 full-time employees that, again, you heard about the delayed hiring in 2024. Those savings, they'll now be here for a full year in 2025. This also includes raises, and this also includes the new staffing that you heard in the executive session last month. For our pension payments, per PAC's recommendation of moving to 6%, the MMO will be 1.9 million for 2025. And for the interest of time, unless the board would like to, you received the preliminary budget that's at the end of your packet. It starts on page 1 through 8 on the backside. If you would like, we can go through the lines unless there are any specific questions we'd like to discuss, or we can move on to the next section.
Just for the MMO payments, after this year going down to 6%, we're done lowering, we're set in, we can pop the champagne, right?
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
I just wanted to ask, so at the last meeting, and we were looking at all the unfunded items, and then you had found a $1.5 million surplus, roughly. I think you budgeted 1.2 just to be safe with it. There was a concern, it was brought up in the budget minutes, that I had asked about the parking. And the parking lot, I believe, is required through zoning for the new Park and Rec Center project. And it came out to 1.5 roughly.
The New Britain Road.
The New Britain Road parking?
No, I don't believe so, Dave. The parking on site for the field, the new athletic courts, and the parking for the community recreation center is incorporated into the existing and proposed expansion of parking in that area of the site. The additional parking on New Britain Road is to just help with having additional parking, special events, things like that.
How was that 100 spots, because I was surprised when Dave mentioned it, how was that identified? That was a zoning formulary, is that correct?
No.
No.
Dave took this.
That was just an analysis by the engineer to say how much parking can we carve out of these areas. That was really just to maximize the parking up in that lot off New Britain Road.
What was so were the engineer asked how much to carve out based on needs that we would need if the park's in full capacity? Is that what that's?
Right,
Is that
we
correct?
we've asked them to basically provide us with as much parking as possible up there in that lot.
Based on, so as much as possible because of the need of the use of the park, is that correct?
Correct, I mean, that's what it's,
I
yes,
was gonna
that's
say,
what
we're
it's
not
used for,
just
but there's
park-
nothing.
We're not paving to pave. My point is there had to be a formulary for them to identify 100 spots in addition to.
No.
Dave, how many are up there now? How many are up there now?
I apologize.
'Cause they're not striped, I know
Yeah,
that.
we don't have striped spots.
We don't have
I
striped
know we don't.
spots
I
on New
think we're
Britain.
probably around 100-ish,
100. So we were trying to develop-
95,
yeah.
if we really striped them. So there was nothing specific said, if you're, you have a park, therefore you need this many spaces based on an ordinance or some type of criteria. We just said, maximize the parking up there as much as possible because we're underparked in the parks.
Right,
And
because
that's-
we already know we're underparked.
Yeah.
So once we did what we needed to do down here, but we still know we're underparked. So that's
Especially
why
for
you
large
asked.
events.
I guess, right, I'm just trying to understand how we got to saying we need to expand the parking. That's all, I'm just trying to understand that.
Just because we've historically been underparked in Central Park from day one.
Especially
Right,
when
so-
we have large events.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not, there's no use and occupancy tied to having this parking lot?
Not on New
Britain Road.
Britain Road parking lot. No.
But it will be something you'll have to do.
No,
No.
it's already planned out in the
So it's.
plan that's,
I mean, if you're saying we're under, I guess I'm just trying to understand. In one breath, we're saying we already know we're underserved with the park. We're now adding all these awesome amenities. We're adding the rec center, we're adding pickleball and all these things, plus our normal, park activities, which we know are busy. So we know there's going to be need, even though you're saying it's not officially part of the zoning, which I thought it was, so thank you for clarifying that. So why wouldn't we do it now, knowing that we already are underserving our community?
Because we have the ability to use the grassed area, which we call Oktoberfest, if those of you who remember Oktoberfest back in the 90s and early 2000s. We have always used the grassy area at the top of the hill for overflow parking when we have large events. So we utilized it this summer for the concerts. And, I mean, we're kind of,
I understand, but if it's a rainy day, we talk about ADA having to pave over at the park. I guess my point is, if we're truly serving the community and offering, making this our biggest amenity to the township, why wouldn't we do all of it? I mean, for me, it's a safety issue. You know, that's,
Well, we do
have
offer
seniors.
ADA spots, right? We have
Yes.
ADA spots available for people who need it.
yes, we do. And
how many ADA spots would you need?
we
for-
used, for the summer concerts, which we would use, we used almost the full parking in the first parking lot, we might call it the Kids
Well-
Castle lot, has the most, as well as the other parking lots. In addition, additional ADA spaces are being added with parking for the courts as well as the building, the CRC. So there will be additional spots added as well. So I mean, the issue with New Britain Road, yes, it'll be very beneficial to have it, but, you know, it's further away, certainly will help when we have really big events, but people don't always like to walk that far. when we
And
have
Stephanie,
big
let's
events.
not forget the opportunity we may have to get funding for that. If we put it off and don't do it now, we will have a better chance of getting funding for that.
I understand. It's more of a service and safety for me, and that if we have a $1.5 million surplus roughly, we can finish this project because we're quoting $500,000 to park and do the stormwater management. Oh, no, I'm sorry, it's 1.5 to do the water management and the parking. It's only going to go up in price. And I'm just saying, if you're providing a service to the township, parking is a necessity, and that should be part of that. And we're already saying we're underserved now, so.
But wouldn't that be
that's-
spending more money than we want to spend at this time? I don't understand.
We have
It is,
the one-
and foregoing
We
potential
would have to
future
forego, we have a
funding.
lot of unfunded things. We didn't really talk about the list.
I think we did. I think we had this.
No, we didn't go line by line on that list. The
you
only
not-
thing we
can you
talked
not-
about was the park, the dog park.
Can you not interrupt
Quite
me?
frankly, we should be saying, okay, if we're going to commit this kind of money to this kind of a project, which we have, and we have to pull up our big boy pants and say, okay, what are we going to cut back on? If you look into one of the slides, they clearly say we are spending more than we're bringing in. And we need to be mindful of that. This is not monopoly money.
So the solution is not to spend the money on a parking, which is something we all would like, but it's not a necessity. And also, that money that we could get, Barb was 100% correct. We have an opportunity to be able to capture some funding for that we would just forgo if we decided to just take this money now. It's also, you have to be very careful, because the money that's there now in excess does not mean that we won't need it next year or the year after or the year after. Rainy day funds are important, and having that extra money might give us a buffer where we don't have to raise taxes. And to me, that's very, very important.
Right, well, we are already raising taxes.
So
One,
we
two,
will not continue to raise taxes just for the sake of raising taxes, so we
this
can
is-
have a want and not a need.
Well, there's a lot of wants on that unfunded list that are not needs, and that's my point, is that this parking is, I mean, it's the most basic necessity when you go anywhere, is parking. So,
So why don't we get a consensus from the board? Is everybody okay with foregoing the parking for the
Yes.
the time being?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, we can continue.
So for the interest of time, would the board like me to go through this single-handedly, or can we move on?
I
to-
don't need that.
Okay.
Thank you for asking.
Are there any questions from the board about any specific items before we move on? I think we went over this in the past, and
Correct.
it
So if
was-
there are questions later on from the board, if you email Stephanie, you'll see it says 2024, 2025 comments. That's discussing the differences between our forecast and our 25 estimate. So if we do go through it and have some questions, please let us know. So with that operating budget comes the millage plan. So you'll see that we are proposing a tax increase of 3.695 mils. This is to fund the general fund, park and rec, debt service, and roads and bridges. The general funds for the public safety, you have the new officers and that MMO payment. Park and rec, as you've heard, we have growing amenities and we're investing in a new building. Debt service, because we did the 2024 borrowing, and roads and bridges, which is the infrastructure. I just want to remind the board that the roads and bridges now contains roads, bridges, stream crossings, trail maintenance, and the engineering that gets associated with those projects. So the compass of that has kind of grown. What you're going to hear next is Ed's going to give a demonstration on how we have come to the conclusion of the 3.695 mils. So I will hand it over to Ed.
Thank you. Let me find my mouse. Now, this is why we have you at the monitors, so that you can see this collection of numbers. I'm going to start, however, with this one, which is the millage plan. And at the moment, the millage plan is set, as you're looking at it right here, at last year's tax plan. So this is what we had said a year ago was going to happen. And I will point out to you, if you look in the 2025 column, we were going to grow the general fund, we were going to grow debt service in concert with our new obligations, and we were going to cut down the roads and bridges fund. And what you're going to see is that that's going to change. So let's go to this one. This is actually what Ken and Ann and I look at when we get all done the forecast. This is what's called the fund balance chart. These are each of our funds and where we have our money, and this is the balance in each of those funds at the end of each year. These numbers are the result of revenue and expense and transfers that occur every year. So this is the result that comes out from all the activity. And this is what last year's tax plan looks like when it's applied to this year's forecast, with one exception. This shows capital for 25, but it doesn't show it in the years that follow. And just to give you an idea of what happens, now I've added the capital for the last 4 years, and you can see that the numbers got redder and redder and redder. So for the moment, we're going to talk about the operations plan. I'm going to take the capital in the last years out, and we're going to focus on what this tells us about operations. Let's focus first on one message that Ann delivered, was that we have a budget surplus in 2024, which we can apply to capital. And if you look at the capital reserve fund 31, showing negative through all this period of time, the thought here is that we can use that budget surplus by transferring it from the general fund into capital reserve, and lo and behold, magically, Fund 31 is now black in 25, and it's actually black all the way through, but don't forget, I'm not showing any of the capital in the outer years, so that's exactly what you'd expect. Now, there's two other things to point out. We're going to come back to this one, but the bottom line is roads and bridges. And you can see that this gets anemic to far worse over the years. These are not acceptable results. And therefore, the reasons that we have put more burden on Fund 53 by loading in trails maintenance, engineering to go with it, the engineering to go with roads. We put everything associated with infrastructure management, basically, and maintenance into this fund. And that enables us to see it rather easily and deal with it on its own basis. So we're going to come back to that in a minute. Let's come up here to this line, which is Fund 5. This is Parks and Recreation. And what I want to point out to you here is that Parks and Recreation is embarking on a new course starting in 2025 in the new building. But it takes 5 years to get to the promised land. If you remember the presentation back a couple of weeks ago when Karen talked about things, the revenue took all the way until 2029 to get to $1 million. And frankly, we're going up to 300,000 in 2025, and we step up all through that period. But all through that period, we are running at a significant loss. So if you look at what these numbers tell you, we're losing 400,000, another 400,000, another 400,000. Now we're down to about 200,000, and now we're starting to flatten out. So that means that we have to invest in Parks and Recreation during that period to keep it properly afloat. So we propose to transfer about $800,000 over that period of time into Parks and Recreation, and now you'll see, although not acceptable, at least the bleeding is far less intense. But we still haven't got it to the point where it's operationally sound, nor do we have roads and bridges operationally sound. So now we turn to the vehicle of real estate tax. And now we propose a tax plan, which you can see has cleared all of that. But of course, you're going to want to say, what did it do? So we go to the millage chart, and now what you'll see is that we are no longer removing millage from roads and bridges in 2025. Instead of taking a mill off, it's up a half, and that's to help support the load that roads and bridges is covering. We have trimmed the amount that goes into the general fund, and we've added millage to Parks and Rec. The net of this thing over this 5-year period is that whereas last year we raised real estate tax by 3.895, we're now raising it by 3.995. We're 1/10 of a mil more over the 5-year period, though admittedly the distribution is different, and it has raises of tax in 25, in 26, and it has a return of taxation downward in 27. But this operational plan is only 1/10 of a mil higher over that whole period than we had formulated last year. And that, in essence, is the story. I'd like to come back, however, to this chart. Even with the fund balances now set like this, if I now allow the capital in the outer years to show, you can see we still have unfunded capital that we have to deal with. This ends up about $4 or $5 million over this period of time. These three funds are the three funds that we use to pay for capital, and that amounts to about $4 or $5 million over the course of this. We intend, as a finance department, to spend a good part of the next 6 months after we have this budget done formulating what our plan going forward will be. And I think Ann can talk about a little bit about what the elements are. This is not the first time we've raised this subject. In last year's plan, we formulated borrowing for the future, and that's how capital was covered. That's certainly an option. Taxation's another one. There's another number of approaches we can take. But for this go-around, we, sitting here putting this together, are focused on 24 and 25, and we'd like to spend the next 6 months getting the capital plan together. So I'm going to put the capital back to sleep and tell you that's where we are.
Works for me. Works for me.
Jen, as chair, I know you've attended a few of those fire department and EMS, and we know there's a shortage. If you look at our millage, it continues to stay really low, and I'm concerned about a rainy day fund. Yeah. So are you concerned, or should we start to plan? Have you heard anything? Should we be planning for that, or where do you stand with that? What do you think?
I'll have Stephanie answer.
Yeah, the fire company, Doylestown Fire Company, is having a DCD study completed. Several of us were at that presentation. That is in process, and we do not anticipate, I met the DC gentleman, he was going around to the borough and the township, and I asked him when we could expect the report, and he said probably sometime in July or August.
Okay, because
We
we
won't know
know there's
anything,
we know there's a huge shortage.
The
We know
the
something.
lacking of volunteers, there's no doubt about it. And Judy and I also attended a presentation back in June. Everyone was invited. It was on a Saturday. And, you know, everyone's having the same issue in and around. Some have gone to more of a full-time. Some have gone to a hybrid. We already have a millage allocated for the fire company.
You're right here, this line right here.
Yep. And we will have to see what, if anything, in the future might be needed as they address the needs and what comes out of the report. But obviously, that wouldn't, you know, it would probably be a 26, 27, maybe even 28 by the time things actually got rolling, if that's what they anticipate happening, whether it's hybrid or something else. So I think at this point, we need to be patient. We need to wait for DCD to complete their study and see what recommendations they come forth with.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Ed, I'm sure I could look this up in my own paperwork, but since I have you in front of me, do you remember what the proposed tax increases or millage increases were last year when we discussed 2025?
I do. It's actually, let me put it up. They're right here. This is the 24 budget plan, and this is the 25 budget plan.
Okay, so if I'm,
I can also, if you want to know the differences by fund, I have that down here also, but
I appreciate the thoroughness, but just so we're about what we expected as far as a millage increase goes for this year.
yes, well, it's higher. There's
Okay.
no question that it's
That's why I want
higher.
to make sure that I'm reading
It's
this right.
higher, and it's about where we expect it to be for debt service. And if anything, debt service is lighter because we don't have the capital borrowing that we had in last year's plan. But the thing that has changed is moving these programs into roads and bridges has dramatically altered what we have to do for that fund in order to support the engineering and trail maintenance and all the stuff that we know we have to do. We need that to be in kind of a safe area. So instead of, this is going up by $1.5 million compared to last year. We were taking this down by $1 million. So that's the biggest change. And we sliced $0.5 million. We were at 1.5 going up last year. And to balance this off, I was able to pull the general fund down. One thing I should point out to you in all this, we'll go back to this chart for a minute. This plan, I don't know if any of you remember, but we have standards that we're supposed to meet in year 3 and year 5. And with this tax plan, we're kind of right there. Year 5, we're actually well above where we need to be. And we're right within the range for year 3. So this tax plan doesn't violate our standards in terms of fund balances are concerned. Again, leaving the big question of what we do with capital in the box there.
So compared to other municipalities in the area,
I
like
wasn't-
how do we
We'll get there.
measure up?
That's our next step.
That's our, let
But
let me
Dan-
back out of this.
To answer Dan, last year, I guess it was 1.9 mils, and now we're asking for 3.695.
So it's definitely up.
But can you go back, Ed, can you go back to the next page, the page you had up with the millage? Just to clarify again, because we always project out so many years into the future, you had the difference, which I think is, you were projecting that from 24 through 29, we would be up 3.895 mils?
Right here.
And right now, we're projecting, again, we're going to be up 3.995 mils. So it's a difference of
Tenth of a mil.
a tenth of a mil.
We're just
going
moving
into guide.
We're just moving it forward instead
Yeah.
of spreading it out.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay.
And we have to remember that you're always budgeting for the year ahead. And even though we do a great job looking ahead for 4 or 5 years out, a lot of places don't. Brenda's shaking her head, thank you. A lot of places don't look that far out, you know. And so every year, you're going to be sitting here having that opportunity to reevaluate your capital, your revenue, your expenses, and make any and all adjustments that you feel you need to make in that kind of coming year. So at the end of 25, you'll sit here and decide really what you want to do for 26. We're just showing you what we believe could happen in those outer years.
So peeking ahead to 26, we are looking at another increase, and then we should potentially be done for a while.
Well, more than done, we're also showing in 27 that
Increase.
we're going
Right.
to, we're going to give some back.
Uh-oh, don't say that. Don't say that. One of our predecessors, long, long time ago, gave back money.
A lot.
You know what we're talking about? As a tax rebate, and then they had to like jack it up 3 years later to make up for what they gave away, or gave back. I mean, just got this institutional memory here.
I have other
Brenda's
thoughts on
shaking her
that
head.
myself,
She
but
remembered.
I think we should save that for another time.
Yeah, I think so too. It's a little premature.
It's a conversation for next year, but I like having an eye on where we're headed.
Yeah, that's a good problem to have, though.
Right.
Yes.
So, and if I may, we've been doing this a long time, looking at a 5-year plan, which municipalities do not do. And one of the points that was brought up earlier, there's positive variance in fund balance at the ending of the year. And if administration in any government setting does a good job, there will be positive variances each year. This municipality has a history of being conservative with their revenues and maybe not quite so conservative with capital expenditures or whatever. All of that ends up working out usually in changing the millage that everybody likes.
I was
Not this year, I see, but usually.
I was going to ask, how many years in a row now is it that we've had positive variance?
We missed one.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that one.
It was a long time ago.
No, it was 2023, actually.
No.
Feels like a long time ago.
But we've been positive other than that, yes.
Yeah.
Any questions regarding the 2025 millage plan? Okay.
Let's go back. to
One-
it.
I mean, this is probably, I think you all do a great job, so I really trust your numbers, your thought process. You know, I think you have brilliant minds, so I appreciate what you do, but, you know, I just have a question, which I don't understand this statement. It's under 2026, 2029 capital. The bullet is management plans to
So I'm not
enha-
there yet.
Oh, okay.
We haven't gone
okay.
over that yet.
Okay, all right, thanks.
We're coming to
It's- It's probably just, you know what you're talking about there, and I don't, so. okay.
I'm not sure we answered Jen's question where we fall into other municipalities.
Correct. So that is the next
Is that where you were
slide.
going to go next?
Correct. So,
Glad you brought that up.
yes. So when we started having this discussion regarding millage plans, I kind of reached out to other municipalities to see where they were, just seeing how they operate, just so we can, take and give from what other municipalities do. So I took some that we use on our GovHR side, and I took some that I've heard the board mention, the ones that we look at for some analysis. So I will start with the graph to the right. just the blue bar graph, that is the average household, what they pay in tax dollars by municipality. So you'll see we are right in the middle of that chart. The orange on top of ours, that shows what our millage plan would do to the average household, the average tax dollars for an average household. That's with the assumption that no other municipalities raise their taxes in 2025. I have reached out to a few of these, and I can tell you that they are also, but they're still in their budget process, so won't share any of that, but they are also. So that's the right-hand side, and this goes off of the assessed value, which we get off of the land use classification from Bucks County. And on the left side, I pulled everybody's budgets from these 8 municipalities and started the analysis. The first bar graph shows what their total millage is. The middle one is the general fund, and the last one is Park and Rec. Doylestown Township is the light blue one. You can really kind of see the significance in the general fund. We are, again, in the middle in that blue. So we have 5 mills in our general fund, and you'll see everyone else has between 6 and almost 14. Per the second-class township code, we're only allowed to have 14 in the general fund. So what I noticed on this trend is every township to the left of us, so Northampton, Warrington, Lower Makefield, those are the ones that have very similar amenities to us. Warrington technically has a rec center, so all of those have rec centers. So I use those for the Park and Rec analysis, and same with the general fund. I do want to touch on Park and Rec very quickly. You'll see that everyone to the left does about 2 to 3 mills in their Park and Rec. The difference between Northampton, Warrington, and Lower Makefield, Northampton especially, 1 mill is over $500,000 in revenue. Our mill is $278,000. So the townships that have recreation centers are investing over $1 million into their Park and Rec. So it kind of helps give some insight for why there's some tax increases in the Park and Rec. Just, we're giving the same amenities and services, if not more. Same kind of with the general fund. So you'll see that the trends are, a lot of these townships are maxing out in their general fund. So I just wanted the board to it helps understand a little bit more when we start to compare with other townships.
Thank you, that's
Perfect.
very helpful.
It gets a little confusing, so I was trying to make it as simple. So any questions regarding the comparisons?
I understood it.
Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Do you know what Buckingham was, out of curiosity?
So Buckingham, I don't use as a comparison because they get much more money in EIT. So their real estate taxes is like 4 mills. So they're not an even comparison. So I tried to find ones that provide the same services. Like I said, ones that have rec centers just like us. And like I said, I used the Borough, Warwick, Plumstead. And then Middletown, I'll touch on Middletown a little bit because you'll see that their general fund millage is low. They're a commercial based. They enacted the mercantine tax, so that to them is about $1.1 million of their budget. So they're able to keep their general fund a little lower because they have other sources that we do not have.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So we're going to move on to the 26 to 29 plan. Like you heard, Ed discussed the potential for lowering some taxes, what we're looking for in the millage plan from 26 to 29, and that was for operations. Obviously, like you heard, we evaluate these on a yearly basis, so just some projections we're seeing. But to bring up Judy's point, we'll talk about 26 to 29 capital. I went back, I can see, like in prior budget work sessions, like you heard Ed, we originally thought we were going to have to borrow for 2025 capital. With the surplus, we no longer have to do that, but it's been kind of said. And no, last budget work session, our capital requests are exceeding our ability to fund. The unfunded is just higher than what we're bringing in. So what we'll propose to the board is to make alternatives to funding. And to your point, Judy, for what we plan to work with management to kind of enhance this process with capital, using to be able to limit capital and rationalize it, where we've discussed the priority, the safety, the maintenance, trails, replacement, beneficial. And that's kind of how we've made that distinctions on how, okay, what capital has to be done and what can be kind of moved off. So when we start talking about the alternatives, which Ed had already mentioned, we're going to have a much further discussion in 2026 on how the board would like to proceed with funding capital in those outer years, whether it's the borrowing, a dedicated tax millage, or if you use any type of surplus for every prior year to fund your capital. We do have a few minutes, so we can open up that if you have any thoughts on moving forward with capital. I know we've brought it up at the last 2 budget work sessions. I think I discussed the alternatives.
I have a question for you, because I raised the issue and concerns of the trails, and I was already thinking about it, and I don't want to disparage the Bike and Hike Committee. I called Judy about this, because they're just trying to get grants. We never know when we're going to get them, when we're going to get awarded. In this particular budget session, we end up with like 4 trails. And so there were 2 trains of thought. One is, and Dave, you might know, how thick is a trail base? Is it like 2 inches, 3 inches that they put down? Like, how thick are those trail bases?
You're talking pavement and stone, approximately 12 to 15 inches.
How much?
12 to 15.
12 to 15
Yeah,
inches?
6 inches of stone, 3 inches of pavement, 3 to 4 inches of pavement.
Okay, all right.
So it's-
So,
Yeah.
2 things. One is, as I said to Judy, we want to be mindful and be thoughtful of our environment, and so we're impacting with this pavement. And is there a way to identify trails that could potentially be either gravel or could be wood chips? Maybe there's passive trails versus, these riding trails. I mean, we are the leader. I mean, I'd love to see us push back. DCNR dictates the width that has to be paved for accessibility. But since we are already the leaders, I don't know if there's a way to create those kinds of guardrails around that, because once we take them on, we then, as we see, have like $1 million in maintenance. So I'm just trying to figure out a way to still provide those kinds of opportunities, sensory activities and recreational activities, but maybe think about how we could do that wouldn't tax our budget so much. So that was one of the things I thought about with this idea. So I do like that you're going to rationalize them, but I do think we have an opportunity. I mean, there's other townships, I would just say, who won't even do the trails because they can't match the money, or they don't have the public service people to help them.
So I just want to jump in on this because I've been on the EAC before, so I know where you're going with the environmental. And I think our township does an amazing job at determining what the best types of trails should go in certain areas. Like, there are certain places that absolutely need to be paved because it's a commuter trail, something like that. For safety purposes, it's a paved trail would make the most sense. And of course, we have some wood chip trails. We have some natural kind of trails in the woods. But, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but if it's a paved trail, we might not have to touch it for 20 years. If it's a wood chip or a more natural trail, we'll be doing upkeep constantly on it. So the savings, I don't know as if there's much of a savings as far as that goes, because once the material's down for a paved trail, it's down for 20 years.
Well, I'm just thinking of more of the environmental piece of it, and I guess I also just asked the question, we have 30 miles of trail, and Jen, I've raised this question with you as well, like 30 miles is a lot. We're the leader in the state. We're being recognized, and I think it's an opportunity to just sort of look and see. Walkability is really important, but so is the taxes and the taxability. I mean, last October, we had people sitting here. We had a woman come in and speak and say she counts on that $2.50 meal at the senior center, and we have to remember who we're serving, and we have to remember that, well, it's 3.69. I mean, when you see the numbers that we're spending, and we're spending beyond our tax base, I just question, I'm glad we're going to reevaluate, but I would really ask you to look at that environmental impact with trails and how much we really need.
Thank you. Is there anything else, Anne-Marie?
So, I mean, to wrap up, I mean, you heard what our plan is for 2025, so I think finance is just looking for direction from the board, if, the go-ahead to start creating that 2025 budget from what you heard tonight, so we can get the presentation on November 19th.
I'm good.
I'm good.
I'm good.
Let's go November.
I'd like to see it at 3, personally. I'd like to see if there's how we can shave it down a little bit, but
I think we have
think-
consensus.
Thank you, board.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, meeting's adjourned. Executive session coming up.
Good job, everybody. Thank you.